that's good. Jay's coming, he had a 4 o'clock meeting, so he should be here shortly.
We can always sort of shift that around. Everybody's here, so Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to this June 19th, 2018 meeting of the Sustainability Commission of the City of Palm Springs. We're delighted that all of you are here. I have asked Commissioner Wilson if he would lead us in the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Dan, if you would do the roll call, please.
Where'd it go? Sorry about that. Okay. Chair Jackson,
Present.
Vice Chair Clark.
Present.
Commissioner Baker is absent. Commissioner Futterman is absent. Commissioner Goins.
Present.
Commissioner Santora.
Here.
Commissioner Wilson.
Present.
Commissioner Friedman.
Present.
Commissioner Gauthier.
Present.
Commissioner McCann is out. Commissioner Spry.
Here.
And Dara Shea is also out.
And
We
all
have
of
a
those absences did notify us in advance, and so they're all
Correct.
excused absences. The agenda for tonight's meeting was emailed to all of you and posted last Thursday evening per city policy. And so I'd ask for a motion to accept the agenda, or if there's a adjustment, you may offer that.
So moved.
Okay. We got a motion from Commissioner Santora and a second from Commissioner Spry. All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed say no. Abstain, and we have our agenda. And I'll just say, I think tonight our primary focus is on the new business items, particularly the budget of F1. So I'm going to move us along a bit so that we can get there and have the chunk of time, that half hour that is devoted for the new business section, so we can spend a good amount of time there. Jay, are you collected well enough to make your report? Welcome.
Thank you, Mr.
Staff
Chair.
report.
Actually, the report focuses on budget, so why don't we just wait until we get to that point?
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Nothing else other than budget items from
Well, at the
council?
last council meeting, just the extension of the current terms until the end of the calendar year. And I believe that impacts 3 of our current commissioners. If they choose, if they have applications in, they are being extended for that 6-month time frame. And of course, with a lot of the changes going on in the city, possibly with redistricting, I think the council's just very interested in doing a broader outreach campaign to fill commission seats also.
So, so that it does apply. Commissioner Spry's would have been, and Commissioner McCann are available to reapply. My term was ending, but I haven't exceeded 7 years, and so it's also possible for me to extend until the end of the year as well. So that was that action. Okay, and I think the other things will come up in committee reports. Oh, I guess I did want to ask, where are we with our leaf blower brochure?
I'm still working on trying to get a photographer. Roy had mentioned that he wanted to get a picture of a local home and leaf blower.
A more Palm Springs
look to it. So
Yeah.
I'm still working on getting that
Okay.
done.
Is the text, is the rest of the text approved in whatever channels we need to do that?
It has been reviewed and edited by the city manager. I believe the text is in fine condition,
Okay,
so we would be able to move on quickly.
okay. And then as soon as we get the photography done, we'll want to figure out a PR plan of how we are distributing it to businesses or to homeowners. So, so we'll follow up with staff on that. Okay, thank you. Any questions, commissioners, of staff at this point? Okay. Commission Student Liaison Reports. As we mentioned, Dara Shea is absent tonight. This being the last meeting of the fiscal year, in effect, her appointment as a student representative concludes. I did email her on behalf of the commission and thanked her for her participation and service, and invited her to, if she was aware of other students that might be interested, to let the commission know. But I just wanted to say publicly a thank you to Dara Shea for being our student representative this term. All right, we are at public comments. At each meeting of the Sustainability Commission, we reserve time for persons to speak to the commission on topics that are related to our area of responsibility. If there are those, you have 3 minutes. Come forward to one of the microphones, and you should identify yourself, your name and your city, and we'll begin.
Ironek Rosenberg, City of Palm Springs.
All right. This gentleman has asked, I'll read what he's submitted. I request that my 3-minute comment be read aloud by one of the members. I'm currently by choice going without speaking. If this is acceptable, I'll sign in here, and this is my public comment. He did identify himself as we asked. Good afternoon. I am a 68-year-old citizen, retired, living here in the city, uptown area since 2005. I'm single and sustain my small studio apartment existence on a fixed Social Security retirement income of around $900 a month, basic needs met, and fairly comfortable and secure. If my presumption of what this meeting and sustainability is all about, I simply wish to share one idea. Being a large quantity paper user virtually all my life, and coincidentally or otherwise being born in the year 1950, the same year exactly Xerox Corporation introduced electrical copy machines, I have discovered using a standard photocopier and regular 8.5 by 11 copy paper, the user can quite simply, after making a copy, reload the page again into the new paper tray and print a second, same or different copy on the other side. As you might guess, using this method, paper costs and waste can be reduced by 50%. I would hereby today like to encourage anyone who uses copy machines to spend a little time exploring the feasibility of this print on the other side again process, and wherever practical, copy and print on both sides. My thanks to this commission for the opportunity to share. Aaron Rosenberg, citizen. Thank you, Mr. Rosenberg.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other public comments? Yes.
Good afternoon, Commission, friends, and neighbors. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. I want to talk about 2 topics. One has to
And
do...
your name again, please.
Oh, Paul Hendrickson, Palm Springs resident. Seeing this wonderful bike sitting over here. As my husband and I travel around the country, and we just finished a 6,000 or 7,000 mile driving tour, we visit so many cities, and this is becoming more common, and it's a wonderful resource to have these bicycles. But there's a nuisance that's developing in all the major cities we're visiting. The bikes are being left everywhere, including at street corners, in the way of people getting across crosswalks. They're laying on the ground. They're in the public planters and stuff like that. So when looking at this project, geolocating is an important topic related to it. And if tight geolocating and specific sites can be mandated for the return of the vehicles, maybe we can avoid having that problem in our city before it gets started. So that's a consideration. Second topic is You've seen us here before talking about the smoking ordinances and stuff, and we're hoping that that can be on the agenda for next month so that when Commissioner Baker speaks about it, we will have an opportunity to participate in the discussion as well. Because I reviewed we were out of state last month, and I reviewed the video from this meeting, and I cringed because there were a lot of misunderstandings that went around and decisions and opinions that were made on things that were not accurate. So if we can be part of the conversation, we can help give some clarity. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Paul, I just suggest that you be sure and meet with Commissioner Baker prior to the July meeting so that as a part of his report, if there have been some misunderstandings, he can include those in a report to us.
Yeah, we spoke with him
Okay.
already.
All right,
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in public comment? All right. I think I see no one coming. I'll declare public comment closed. I don't believe there are any introductions or welcomes that need to be made at this meeting, and so we are at our presentations. And so, Andy, we welcome you to the table from Gotcha Bikes.
Thank you, everyone. Should I sit here so I'm on the mic, or?
Yeah.
Yes.
The green one that's lit up?
Yes.
I'm always looking for a stage and open mic, so this is perfect. And perfect lead-in. So that was a great comment from a citizen for coming into this presentation. So I've got this also here, but if you could just do the presenter or just the slideshow. And I know everyone's dying to get to the budget portion of this meeting, and nobody wants to dwell on the fun stuff of bicycling. So I will move pretty quickly through here because I would love to spend the precious time that we have just with questions that you might have, with observations about bicycling culture and specifically bike share opportunities. But Gotcha is the name of the company, the Gotcha Group. We do mobility work and media, we say. We do a lot of advertising on campuses, but we do a lot of bike share and electric vehicle ride share. So I'm here because my background is urban planning and transportation planning. For 20 years, I've been doing that. So I just so happen to now be in this business where I'm directly getting people onto bicycles after spending most of my career designing routes and doing the planning and design of bicycling infrastructure. So if you want to do just that slide, I'll tell you when to go to the next one.
I'm just trying to keep it from moving by itself.
Oh, was it on times? Yeah, there you go. If you just do, from current slide, and there shouldn't be times in there. Yeah, and then I'll just tell you. So just a quick snapshot of the mobility. We do bike share, and we do the low-speed electric vehicles. I won't dwell on the low-speed electric vehicles, although it's a hot climate. This is the kind of place that, especially a progressive area like Palm Springs, that may be something at a future date you'd want to chat about. But if you want to go to the next slide, this is what RIDE looks like. It's intended for small-ish areas, so downtown environments, college campuses, that sort of thing. And then the next slide. I should just mention, too, that the RIDE is either app-based or on-demand, kind of hailing, standing on the side of the street. This is what the bike share looks like, though. Fully customized, GPS-enabled. Some people would call it dockless. Some people wouldn't. I mean, it's hard. It depends on who I'm talking to, how I describe it, whether it's docked or not. I'll get in a moment why I kind of hem and haw about whether or not it's dockless. But you've got a bike here that we're going to leave it with you guys for about a week, and I'll work with Dan about taking care of it after the fact. But I want you guys to be able to ride it, to share it. We can talk about how to keep tabs on it, but so you can get an idea. Everybody knows what a bicycle is, but just what's different, how this particular bike share feels. But one of the things I wanted to call attention to with this picture is just it looks like the particular area that it is. It's not Andy's bike and my color scheme everywhere it goes. But if you want to do the next slide, Dan. Thinking ahead to Palm Springs, I mean, this is just one option. Any kind of color, any kind of branding, is possible with these bikes. That's what we mean by completely customizable. They're 10-year frames, so they're built to be really durable. And if you want to go to the next slide, this is possibly what the direct kind of support for what you just heard from one of your neighbors in the community. What sets Gotcha apart, I would say, going to the next slide, it's this fundamental philosophy. Bicycling is transportation. And then because of that, like, yes, it's also recreation, but primarily the fundamental modes of transport are walking and riding bikes. Because of that, public bikes, a bike share system, if you think of it as kind of a very efficient form of public transportation, they should live in safe and predictable areas. We think, said even more simply, bikes should lock to bike racks. So we love systems that have bikes in predictable places. You can see the U-bar that's attached. It's designed to go into any kind of normal bike rack. So there's all sorts of flexibilities about where hubs go, and that's the urban planning fun of this. But as you heard from the gentleman earlier, we want to keep sidewalks clear for people walking. We want to keep bikes in the hubs where they belong. So our strengths as a company are in those kinds of details. So we're people that do transportation planning, we do operations, we do marketing, we love all things bicycling. So we want these systems to be safe, predictable, and enjoyable. We don't want ever for bicycling to be a nuisance. If you want to go to the next, this is just a quick snapshot of what these look like in the real world. So if you have just a normal U kind of rack system, this is how they lock. Custom racks that you guys have, same kind of thing. You just find the gap in the curved area, and it works like a charm. But the point of that picture is just, again, we think that bike share hubs should be in predictable places and locked to things. And then if you want to go to the next slide, Dan. This is all of this will look a lot better without formatting glitches. I'm going to send afterwards you guys a copy so you can have on your own screen at your own pace, look through the details of this. I just want to call attention to two things. First is custom branding. This is public transportation, essentially. So we think it should reflect your identity, your culture, which, thinking back to the branding of it, have it look like Palm Springs, have it look like this area, this region. And then the second thing I want to draw attention to, quality. And again, another reason why it's sort of self-serving for me to leave a bike with you guys, because you're going to love the bike. You're going to know riding it, it doesn't feel like a tank, and yet it's a 10-year frame. It's super, super durable. It's fantastic. I don't call myself a cyclist. I'm just a person that likes riding bikes, so I can't geek out on the little details of the gears, but it's pretty amazing. So if you want to go to the next slide. Again, some of these are a lot of details. I don't want to, if you have questions about these, you'll see all of this stuff in your inboxes, but just details about the bike itself, weight, why we choose things that we do, and there are adjustable seats that can't be stolen, things like that. And then one thing while you're looking at it, and you see this over here, that box in the back is the brains of the bike. And that we'll come back to in a moment, why that's important to have the brains in the bicycle itself. But Dan, if you want to go to the next slide. Like many other systems, very straightforward. You don't have to have a smartphone, but it's simply create an account, unlock the bike, go have fun, ride to lunch, ride to a meeting. And then again, leaving it at a hub, locking it at a rack at a hub. If you want to go to the next slide, I don't want to, actually let's go past that so we can get to a conversation point. If you go a couple more, there's a heat map. Yeah, right there. Some of the details that you didn't see on the previous slides were just very specific things that are ways of saying we take care of all of the details. So you guys don't have to worry about anything related to operations. You don't have to hire any people. You don't have to worry about checking air pressure or whether there are enough bikes at a certain hub. We take care of everything. We take care of liability, you name it. This magic on the screen that planners love is made possible by the brains being in the bike. So in the first generation of bike share, like City Bike in New York, Capital Bike Share in DC, near where I grew up, Chicago, those systems have the big kiosks in the ground. The payment system is at the kiosk. You have to go to the thing, have your transaction at the thing, and then you go about your business. The downside is all the data is at those hubs, at the stations. So planners can look at the data and see which stations were busy, where bikes are, or where they're missing. What we're able to do is see everything with the bikes at all times. So that's fantastic for planners because we know, for example, we think, well, we've got this bike route on Broad Street. We think that's the best place for people to ride, and yet we look at the data and we see, why is everybody using Main Street 2 blocks away? Why are they coming around and then going back up? So planners can say, something's up over here. It's more comfortable on this other path. Why is that? That can inform the bike ped plan. That can help implement existing work in an even better way because we know everything about where the bikes are going, how they're being used, all that sort of thing. And then another just tidbit on the data of the bikes, we know, we know exactly where they are in case if someone were to try to steal one. We haven't actually had an issue with theft yet, and I think in part, like what you heard earlier about in some of the cities that just have kind of bike litter all over the place, it's a lot easier to take a piece of cheap equipment and throw it in a truck and make off with it. We have something built in that we haven't had to use yet, where if it gets to 30 miles an hour, we get pinged right away. Hey, this bike is probably not being ridden by a person at 30 miles an hour. We have not had an issue of vandalism or theft yet, and we've got about 35 systems around the country right now. And even in Charleston, South Carolina, where we're headquartered, we've got 250 bikes in downtown. Haven't had an issue yet. And in fact, we're getting ready to expand that system right now. So I wanted to throw out a handful of those key things, especially the emphasis that at our core, we see bicycling as transportation, not as a widget to be sold, but it's part of the bigger system that relates to bus service. It does relate to cars still. It relates to walking. It's part of the transportation system as a whole. So with that, you could go to the next slide, and then, or even the very last one's got my contact information. But for the time that we do have before you guys get deep into budget planning, if you've got either big picture or very detailed questions, I'd love to answer them or to promise you that I'll get back with more information for you.
Yes, Commissioner Goins.
Two quickies, I think. They're quickies. So your revenue model is primarily marketing and ride-sharing fees? Is that how you make money, basically?
So, good question. This is one of the things that it sets us apart and drew me in to the Gotcha Group. We find like-minded people, organizations, sometimes local governments say, look, we've got this budget set aside. We want to implement a bike share program. That's how we do it. When we're working in other places that we know they don't have budget line items for that. So what we do is, because we also work in media, we work with advertisers all the time. You saw the Ben & Jerry's bicycles. We launched that system in Burlington where they're headquartered, and Ben & Jerry's themselves, and then a media firm, 7th Gen, those two, that bicycling is part of their core. Sustainability is a big, big thing for them. And so bike share is a natural outpouring of that. So they saw that as investment opportunities. So that's, for that system, it's a funded system where they are our contract partners, not the city of Burlington. And so the bike share program can be financially sustainable. It's not like we're delivering bikes to them or to you and saying, thoughts and prayers, hope it works out for you, hope you get enough riders. We know this is a viable system, and then we can set the individual rider fees however you would like to set them. So sometimes on college campuses, colleges want to provide a system completely free for users. Local governments, usually it's not. Usually you want some kind of fee to bring in some revenue. So on that side, it's completely flexible, but we're not bound to rider fees.
Okay. And then my other question was, here we have a number of hotels and other organizations that are already offering bikes to folks. And, as a sustainability commission, we want to generally support alternative transportation. But obviously, the more bikes, the more ways we can get people biking, the better. So I was wondering if you had thoughts about how your business model fits into these, already existing ways people are accessing bikes here in town.
have no shortage of thoughts on that, but I will limit them. It's a good point, and although I am personally biased to wanting Gotcha Bikes to be successful, it's part of a network of, or not just a network of streets, but it's part of a system of a lot of different modes, and then even within modes, different types. So we know from years of studying bike share that people who use bike share regularly also buy their own bikes. So bike shops are still strong, but for different reasons. They're not strong in the same way they were 20 years ago. They're selling different services and different products, but it's completely compatible with hotels having 5 bikes that they just give to people while they're staying, or for a golf community to give, come stay here and you can ride bikes. So it's completely, I believe, compatible with all those things. It's compatible with college kids coming back home and they've got a skateboard. They'll also be using a skateboard. So yeah, it's just another option. It's having the sometimes I'll compare it to in the transit world, fixed route versus paratransit. So bike share system is more like fixed route, where you've got these predictable hubs. There will always be bikes at these places. They'll be safe and convenient and in working order. And then there'll also be people riding their own bikes.
So one last, and then I'll be quiet. So one soft benefit for this commission is obviously that we'd be encouraging, alternative forms of transportation. Is a hard benefit that the city would have access to data about usage on specific bike routes? Is that one of the proposals that you're offering?
The data, all the data is your data. Yeah, and that's definitely something that sets us apart from others. We when we set up the dashboard, some people love data more than others. It gives me hives, actually, so I let coworkers deal with it. But you guys get set up with an account, so you can access at any point in time. You can pull up the dashboard on your computer and see, oh, bike 24 is over here, and whatever commentary you want, you can pull up. You can generate those heat maps on your own, any kind of map. And then we also have someone that guides if it's you or it's a collect. It's 5 people on city staff. Whoever it is that needs some kind of training, we take care of that. So all of the package of stuff that we do, the urban planning work, the helping sort out where hubs should go, pricing structures, the data, all of that stuff, we're including you guys as if we're working for this, the same team. Yeah, the data is key, that you have the data.
Okay, I just want to follow up so I understand. So a city or governmental entity can own the bikes, or a business group can purchase them and brand them. And does Gotcha actually own the bikes in any city, and then you generate your income through the
Good question.
User fees?
Yeah, I was not clear about that. So it's a leasing model, which is great for you guys because we own all of the bikes in all of the systems.
Okay.
Yes. Now, there are a couple that, like Toledo, Ohio, said, we really want our own bikes. We want to buy bikes. And so we worked out a contract where they're buying equipment. But the vast majority of people would prefer to just kind of like movies as a service. When you go home and you put on Netflix, it's the same sort of thing where you don't have to deal with tire pressure. You don't have to deal with if for some reason a frame was bent. You don't have to worry about any of that. We take care of all of that because it's that leasing model. If something goes awry with a bike, that's on us. That's never on you. So yeah, it's a leasing model, and then that funding of it is it wasn't to buy the bikes. It's the branding. Like here, this one that's in Charleston. Holy Spokes, it's the Holy City. The title partner is MUSC, which is a big health university down there. So they're the ones providing the funding for the system, but it's still, they don't own the bikes themselves. They don't have to worry about storage or anything like that, maintenance, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. Commissioner Spry.
Thanks, hi. Sounds great. I'm just trying to understand the costs, the fees, what would a sample cost be to a city? And then let me go forward to say then what the cost is paying you to provide the service, correct? And that's how you get paid. And then, the users pay the fee and the money goes in. Does that, what does that net? Do cities end up making money from this, or just paying off their initial investment? Or do Does it fund you? I'm just trying to understand what the,
Right.
besides the initial startup cost, how do those fees balance out? Does that make sense?
It does, yes. So startup cost, some people would say there are zero startup costs. Others would say, and some within the companies, others would say, well, it depends on how you look at it. In general, it's not a startup cost in the sense that you don't have to buy infrastructure. Some people want to buy signage panels and wayfinding panels and things like that, which is an upfront cost. But in general, since we do a subscription model with equipment that we own, but you just have access to it, what we do just as a flat fee is I describe it as the value of the bike rather than a cost to you, because it might not be the city that pays for this. But the value of the bike, of the whole thing, is $110 per bike per month, generally. There are exceptions, but it's because there are some places that are just unique in how they want to do a program. But that's a good starting point for it. That's the value of everything. So that's all of the turnkey service. Ridership fee, so that allows us we're a for-profit company, so that allows us to pay the bills, to manufacture more bikes, to operate everything. We hire people. We don't have to come back to you and say, you know what, we decided to move this over here and we ran into this unexpected cost, so now we've got to up the price. It's just a flat, this is the rate per bike per month. And so then we just figure out, what should we do in terms of bikes? Like, what's the big picture idea? What's our vision long term for bikes? Is it 150 bikes in this certain area? Is it 50 in the first year? And then we think forward to what's phase 2. But it's always back to that you can do that very basic math of 110 per bike per month. You asked to follow up, the fees. That is completely flexible. We do some revenue sharing in some locations. Right now, I don't know. I don't have an exact number for how many of all of our systems, how many do a revenue sharing model. But because local governments aren't buying stuff, and then they're not trying to generate money to pay it back. Does that make sense? It's more like this value of 110 per bike per month. So for this service, so who's paying for it? Is it the local government or is it title partners? In Charleston's case, it's MUSC Health Center. If you guys wanted to do a system where there was revenue sharing, then we would certainly work with you to figure out a revenue sharing model for ridership fees. Like if you wanted to say we want the first hour to be $2.50, or we want it to be $1, whatever you wanted it to be, and then from there work out percentages of how much of that goes directly to City Hall. That's something that we can do. It looks like I'm not
Does
answering.
any of the rider fee go back to Gotcha? No, it's just the 110?
It all depends. In some places it does, but
Okay.
The reason why it's not an easy yes or no is that universities, for example, almost always don't have a ridership fee. Because if you're a student, or you're a professor, or you work there, if you have a .edu email address at that school, you just have access to the system. So it's a flexible thing. If you wanted to have, so let's just say, I don't think this would be the case in Palm Springs, but let's just say the Palm Springs city said, you know what, we want to have this to be a totally free system. If you have certain email addresses throughout the city, you have just free access. Then there wouldn't be a revenue sharing. It would just be that value of 110 per bike per month, and then we would have to figure out, where does that come from? Is that the city of Palm Springs that's paying for that, or is it a combination of the city and other entities? Is it a completely separate kind of private funders, again, like Charleston, or Ben and Jerry's? Is it that sort of thing where we know we have these local advocates that would absolutely want to make this a possibility? It all depends. It looks like I'm not answering you.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, let's try to get another question in if there is one. Yes, Commissioner Wilson.
I'm a little confused about operations. So these are decentralized, right? But you said something about hubs. So
How the system itself would operate, or where they
Yeah.
would be located?
yeah,
Okay. So if you have, I was using the word hubs and stations interchangeably, so that I probably add to the confusion by doing that. I mean them as the same thing. If you go back to, if Dan, if you want to go back to that picture of the young woman near towards the beginning, yeah, right there. To the left. There you go. So that's a hub. That's where you would have, maybe it's 10 bicycles together. And then 1,000 feet away or 1,500 feet away, there's another one of these hubs that might have 8 bicycles at it. So throughout the system, you have this hub or a station, however you want to describe it, throughout the city, throughout the downtown. So we would help you, generally the planning staff would be involved in this sort of thing, but figure out where the best places are to site those bikes. We want them in highly visible places. We want them near places that, both residential and retail, all the places that people are coming and going, knowing that this kind of bicycling is best for short short trips, so less than a couple of miles. So we look at the map. There's some very obvious places in Palm Springs where you would say these corridors are hot spots. These are attractions for people. People would probably ride from here to here rather than getting in a car and circling for parking, or having to go to a deck and then walk. So that's a hub, that's a station, whichever term you would want to use. And then if a hub...
But it's just a standard bike rack?
It can be. Some people want to purchase custom bike racks that then have branding on it. So for example, if a private group wants to help fund the system, they can pay a certain amount and have their advertising or their logo on racks. That's not always the case. That's not a revenue generator for us. That's just something like we are the pass-through for that, for the people that do want custom racks. But generally speaking, it's a normal kind of rack, and these are throughout the city. And then one of the things in terms of operations that we do is make sure each of these hubs has enough bicycles. So we're tracking the bikes through the dashboard. We get pinged when a certain number are away for a hub. So we know, like, she's got bikes when she goes here. We know that people aren't going to get off of a bus stop, for example, or arrive at the airport and they've only got a light backpack, so they're fine riding a bike. We know that there's going to be bikes waiting for them, because if it gets empty, we rebalance. We move bikes from one place to another.
Okay. And I assume you've talked to CVAG, but this sort of arrangement would differ from city to city.
It does. One thing that's consistent throughout cities throughout the country and campuses is we love working with local bike shops, because for a couple reasons. One, they're a natural ally, and there's a tendency, if you don't engage with them in the beginning as an ally, then they may feel like they're being pushed out because who's this competitor coming to town that has this different thing. So we want to make sure we're here together, because this is going to get more people riding bicycles. And another great thing about bike shops is they often have employees that are working part-time with the bike shop, not full-time. And so that allows us to contract with them to help us with the rebalancing, to help with maintenance and repairs. So in every place that we're putting bikes, we've got local folks that are already there and know how to work with bikes, now working on the bike share program. And if they don't already know how, then we train them.
But here, there's no benefit to working collectively with CVAG, the Coachella Valley Association of Governments?
Oh, I haven't talked to them yet, but I do know that there would absolutely be benefit in working with them on, or even if it's just the planning of where sites would go and how we can help implement long-range transportation plan, for example. In fact, there are some great similarities between Palm Springs and Coachella, and some of the things that just as a region, both culturally, visually, from the marketing perspective, and just the aesthetics of potential bike designs, but then even the maintenance and operations. There are definitely reasons to talk with them about how this could be, even if you're not, practically speaking, you wouldn't ride long distances, a bike share from one city many miles away to another. You wouldn't do that. But there are certain advantages of having the same system in a region, from closely spaced cities. So,
Thanks.
Okay. I'm looking at the time and thinking that maybe we've heard enough. There could be lots, but just in terms of us moving through the meeting tonight in a timely way. So thank you, Andy.
Thanks so much. And
if
I will
you've-
definitely send you detailed follow-ups, and I'll make note of especially some of the questions that I know I didn't fully address, but we can always talk more. But hopefully the follow-up information, those details will stir up more questions, because yeah, I could keep talking about this stuff with you guys. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. All right, we're at item C, the meeting minutes of May 15th, 2018. Dan emailed those out to us. Is there a motion to accept the minutes as presented or corrections? So moved by Commissioner Gauthier, second by Commissioner Santora. All in favor say yes. Yes. Opposed say no. Abstention? And the minutes are approved. Thank you. Gary Calhoun is here to give us the recycling report.
Good evening. I have passed around on either side a C&D brochure. I've gone through and updated that with the new updated information, phone numbers, who's still in business, who isn't, in preparation for when our construction and demolition debris plan or ordinance passes. So we'll have good information, accurate information to hand out to the contractors, and we make this available to planning and building departments. The other thing I have is that our annual report has opened on June 15th, and it's due by 1 August. For those that don't know, AB 939, which is the overarching legislature that covers recycling, requires that every reporting entity, city and county, submit an annual report describing all the programs that they participate in, their progress, tonnages, and things like that. It's pretty involved report, but that's due on an annual basis. The last thing I have is that Jay, Daniel, and I, as well as Chris Cunningham, participated in a conference call with Andrew Smith from the state. And basically, that was a follow-up to how we're doing. There's recent legislation that allows the state to ask for much more information from the entities. So usually that involves Chris Cunningham reporting whatever the state wants to know more about. And the reason for that is the state is trying to refine and tailor their programs more accurately. So with more information, they hope that they can boil this down to more efficient programs. Also, the one thing that Andrew is very good about is that he gives the city heads up about things that are coming down the pike. And one of the things that is coming down the pike in about 3 or 4 years, 5 years, I think he said, is there's going to be a requirement for 20% diversion of edible food. So that means that restaurants and grocery stores and things like that are going to be required to make sure that food banks and find and organizations like that have access to at least 20% of the food. But that's, like I said, that's down the road, but it's appreciative that he allows us to start planning now. Overall, in my opinion, he seemed to be pretty happy with the progress we were making. We're in pretty good shape, and I think he likes the progress that we've made and the steps that we're taking to achieve those results. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Commissioner Santora.
Thanks for the report, Gary. It's sort of off topic, but there was some dialogue amongst the commissioners about the recent articles about the diversion of, or the lack of ability to divert waste to China and other places. And that came on the heels of a public comment from a woman who talked about her suspicions that not all of our recycling is going to the proper places at the proper time. Did you have an opportunity to see any of that discussion or that reporting? And if so, can you tell us if we should still be worried about where our recycling is going?
I'm not sure I understand your question. I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're asking me.
Well, then you probably didn't see the article. There have been several articles in national press. Right. So the question is, are we confident that our recycling program here and what our folks are collecting in this city are being recycled properly and efficiently the way they were intended to be?
I have no specific knowledge of that, but what I will tell you is that both Burtec and Palm Springs Disposal takes their recycled material to what's called a MRF, a Material Recovery Facility. There's two of them. There's one in Fontana and there's one in Escondido. And there they have picking lines and they have a lot of mechanisms. They'll have little airs that will shoot off like the plastic bottles. And so they do a pretty good job. I don't know what their percentage is, but if you ask if I'm confident, I will say yes, because I know, I've seen the MRFs. I've gone to the MRFs and I know what takes place there.
Well, the follow-up to that then is, where does it go from there?
Well, that I don't know. I don't know who Burtec sells it to, because it's run by Burtec. The MRFs are run by Burtec. I don't know who their customers are.
So in terms of our process, you're confident about that, but collectively, we don't know what happens to it after it's handled by those firms?
That's correct. From here to the MRF, I'm confident. After what happens there, I don't know, because I don't know who their customers are. I would find it hard to believe that they didn't deal with reputable people. They have no reason not to. I wouldn't put myself in jeopardy, certainly.
Yeah, I would suspect they have no reason not to. I think what was raised in these articles and in the press and by the woman who made the public comments is that there may be limited places where that recycling can go now, and that might be diminishing. And in terms of our obligations under the law, we're probably fine there. But in terms of our commitment to recycling and sustainability, I think we're obligated to know what's happening with the waste beyond the processing of it. So I'd be very interested to know if we could find out from either one of these vendors or whoever we use, where does the end product go and is it meeting our expectations?
Well, I'll just team, maybe you missed the meeting when Chris Cunningham was here last, in the last couple of months. Did you hear his presentation? Because he implied that, in fact, materials are stacking up in bales at centers because there isn't a market. Now, I don't want to speak for him or generalize, but that was, he said that he implied that was the case.
And he's discussed that at our Waste Reduction Committee meetings as well.
So it's a problem.
Yeah.
The bottom line is, yeah, it's a problem.
So, but we still. So, at the Waste Reduction Subcommittee meeting, did you figure out where this stuff is going, or is it still being backed up? And is there a plan for it?
There's progress being made now in making the state aware of the problem, but it may take years to develop alternate markets for this material. But I think because we're required to recycle a certain amount, that could be a problem if we can't. And the state is becoming aware, according to what Chris has been reporting to us, of this problem and looking at alternatives.
If you're asking, are we going to lessen our efforts or back off in any way? No, because once it gets to the MRF, then that has, unfortunately, that's up to the waste hauler to deal with that. But as far as I know, our materials, I can't imagine that they would go anywhere other than recycling purposes.
Commissioners, questions of Gary? Gary, did I interrupt you? Did you have more things to say? So you did say this is, this takes into account the likelihood of the council adopting the construction demolition?
Yes, what that brochure is just state-approved facilities where contractors, builders, developers can take their demolition and construction debris.
Okay.
So, yes.
So it's not going to be outdated by any council action?
No,
Okay.
that has nothing to do with it.
Okay.
I have a question.
Please.
A couple of months ago, I think there was a request from Finchy School to have recycling there, and you said that you would address that. Has any progress been made?
No, I contacted or attempted to contact her two times, and I got no response. So the end of the school year. So I'm thinking what we're going to do is there's been some discussions about going out and revisiting the businesses that are affected by 341 because we haven't done that. And that came about by the discussion that we had for Andrew Smith. And I think it's always good to let the state know that we're making a good faith effort. We can't convince everyone to participate and do what we wish that they would do, but we can certainly approach them and address them, and then if they decline, that's on them. But at least we can report to the state that we've tried this like every 2 or 3 years.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Gary. All right, we are at old business, and I did continue the ad hoc subcommittee on film festival programs. Commissioner Futterman is absent. Commissioner Gothier, is there anything tonight that?
No, there's
you need
nothing to report this month.
Okay, all right. We had, item 2 is staff report on rates for city-owned EV charging stations. We had asked at the last meeting that sometime, perhaps this month or next month, we start the conversation on what those rates might be. You two wanted to, you put it on the agenda for tonight. I had thought maybe it might be July, but I'm happy to hear from you if.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, Dan has done a lot of work in this area, and he's going to have to fill in some of the blanks that I leave. But in general, we've identified a handful of service providers who could pick up and work with us in regards to the charging stations that we do have. And what I'm handing out is just sort of a infrastructure of all the things we'd have to account for with deploying charging for electric vehicles and charging, I guess that's a tricky word, requesting payment for charging electric vehicles. ChargePoint was one of the vendors that we thought might work well as they they're able to work with multiple types of electric vehicle connections. They seem to be the most affordable, of course. I think we'll probably have to go out with an RFP before we finalize selection, but that's just an example of the type of service we would have. And they would assist with receiving payment and remitting payment to the city. Of course, they would take their share. But all of them seem to have some kind of a payment card that users have to obtain in order to use the systems. And so in regards to pricing, what Dan found was that many cities are still trying to incentivize use of electric vehicles. So they're not trying to do complete cost recapture, but they are charging something, maybe $1 for the first hour or so, or $2.50, just depending on their own strategy. Anything else, Dan, there?
Yeah, well, like you said, they're trying to incentivize still by maybe not even charging the first hour, giving an hour or two free, and then jumping up to $2.50 an hour. Or some of them, I think, Indian Well or Palm Desert Indian Wells charges $3 after the first 2 hours. Most cities in the valley, I checked, Cathedral City, Palm Desert, Rancho Mirage, Indian Wells, only one of the other cities even had anything to mention about electric vehicle charging. However, there's a website called PlugShare that shows where vehicle chargers are available, and there's plenty of them available in the area. And that site did show that the city of Cathedral City offers free charging at their public parking structures. But that's the only other one that even had anything to say about electric vehicles. So they, around California, I've noticed that many of the cities are still offering it for free, trying to incentivize. They're working with shopping centers or downtown areas to get people to shop. Or workplaces are also looking at them as an incentive as well. However, they're for free charging for the employees. But then there's other things you have to look at. Is does that affect as show up as a benefit? Should it be taxable to the employee if they're using the charger? So there are many things you got to think about, and whether or not, I think that we should be adding some more chargers here to, especially in the downtown area now, but that's up to you guys, but that's, charging is a way to move forward. It's just how you want to do it and when you want to do it, which is up for discussion.
Exactly. So for discussion, your thoughts on rates? Should we phase in a higher rate, keep them relatively low, first hour free? And I believe it's going to be limited to probably 2 hours at the most is what most charging stations do provide, because there's others who need to charge. So I just want to put that out there.
Okay. Commissioners, questions? Yes, Commissioner Friedman.
Is there an update on Tesla? I know council has provided direction, but wasn't sure whether that's moving on, at least on that level.
Tesla will be separately metered, so they will pay for their customers' electricity.
Okay, but has the city actually gone to contract with them, or is that still in discussion? That was sort of just a status report. I know they're covering all of the costs, but just want to know whether they're moving forward with the project.
I haven't heard more in regards to an executed contract, but my understanding was, for all intents and purposes, it was moving towards execution.
Okay, and we did get that report that that there would be no cost to the city for the charging services, right? So you mentioned that you have to have a unique payment card. You can't just use your MasterCard or Visa.
Correct. There are very few of them are accept your MasterCard or Visa at this point. You create an account, you give them a debit card or a credit card, where they charge you $10, most of them $10 to $20 that they put on that as a charge, and then as you use up, they issue you their card, a ChargePoint card or whatever, which you take to the charging, and a lot of them are just a swipe or you place it up next to the the charger, and it reads it, and then as you use it down, then you're automatically recharged the $10 or $20 when it gets low.
Okay, so that works pretty well for residents, but if you're from San Diego or Los Angeles and drive over, would you likely to also be a ChargePoint customer
Yes.
there, and you'd already have your ChargePoint card?
Correct.
Okay, because ChargePoint operates
Nationwide.
Okay. Okay.
That's why we look more at ChargePoint, because it is the largest and has the most
Okay.
stations. They do have their own charging stations as well, but their system is usable for any brand of charger.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Goins, sorry.
In my recollection of the discussion, my feeling was that our primary concern was recapture over infrastructure availability, that it was a cost, that was the issue, more than people being able to get to a charger. Is that a correct statement?
I believe that's the discussion we had previously, was to look at it that way. At that time, however, we weren't aware that other cities maybe are struggling to get users to utilize the system, and perhaps they're trying to incentivize more use by keeping the cost down. I'm not sure on an ongoing basis how much that would be. I don't operate an electric vehicle, but it could be significant over the course of a year, whether you have to pay every few days for a charge versus not. So,
do we have a sense of the order of magnitude of difference? As an example, for an individual customer who was paying a subsidized rate versus an unsubsidized rate, how much of an incentive is it that these cities are actually offering?
Well, from the research I've looked at, the actual electricity used to charge a vehicle is minimal, the charge, so that's why most government entities are just, eating it because that doesn't really amount to a whole lot. I think I think they said it's like 1.5% of their total electricity charge or something like that, or even less, 1.5%. So a very small amount of electricity. So the amount of money that versus the incentive is better for the incentive.
So right now, we are not charging in any charging station in the city. Some of them were initially grant funded, but right now there's no charge.
The only one is the fast charger. That one does charge, except for, I think, for Nissan owners.
Okay. And there hasn't been, at this point, any outcry from the city finance office about the cost of this, right?
That's correct. However, the outcry comes from those who are waiting to charge their car, and someone hasn't unplugged their vehicle and is leaving it there for multiple hours. So,
Okay.
we
Because
are-
it's free and there's no incentive to move it.
Well, we do have parking time limits, so people do have to move their vehicles within those amounts of time. So it's one vehicle we have for enforcing the time limits.
Yeah.
And there is signage stating a 2-hour limit for charging at all the chargers.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Santoro.
So, two questions, really. So the stations that are being put in by Tesla will only charge Teslas, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. But even those, it seems to me, the price is coming down on electric vehicles and plug-ins, hybrid plug-ins substantially. So I think we have to plan for a lot more vehicles out there that can take advantage of this. But it seems to me, if the cars can drive themselves, someone can figure out how to put a timer on the charger, right? So it goes off after 2 hours anyway, and people are not incented to stay there and try and squeeze out an extra half hour out of the parking structure.
That is true. There are also, even with, I know with Tesla and I believe with ChargePoint also, once your vehicle is at 85 or 95%, they'll send you an email saying your car's charged or you've reached your time limit. You could do it either way, and they would send an email or maybe even a text to the owner of the vehicle saying time to move your car. And I did read also that we have the chargers in the Baristo parking lot garage, and those, since we have the meter maids downtown, those are very well monitored, and several tickets have been given out for people staying longer than 2 hours.
Right, I don't see any other commissioner question. Oh, Commissioner
I'll just
Gordon?
say, if that's working, that seems like the low-hanging fruit approach. It seems like a parking enforcement issue maybe more than anything else. And I personally, as a commissioner, would want to keep incentivizing it if it's not a hardship on us, would be my thought.
I guess the other question would be then, is anyone more concerned with recapture of costs for electricity and maintenance, which really there's not much maintenance of the EV charging stations? Okay.
Yeah, I raised that concern with the last discussion. I still have it. I mean, I think if we're going to see an explosion in electric vehicles, it's going to become more and more of an issue. So even if it's a short-term incentive to see if we get, a lot more people using it, there should be something in place to make sure that we don't go beyond a maximum or fix some cap or something to be able to, monitor this in a real-time fashion and then capture the costs if they get to some point that we feel might be excessive.
And I think just by virtue of outfitting the device, the charging stations to take charges, we'd bring on a vendor, and there'd probably be some cost to that. So perhaps a minimal cost just to keep it going for the first 12 months or so, and then revisit it after that to see if use has gone up and if there is a need to start watching how much electricity is flowing out, say, for that low cost.
If our greater concern is moving people along so that the next user can come in, is there a way that we could incentivize the parking enforcement folks to check the EV stations more frequently than maybe some other spots?
I believe they have a system. It's
Okay.
a time system. They drive around in 2-hour routes, and so if someone is still in that spot, they're going to find
Okay.
them.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Okay. All right.
Is there a time limit for parking in the Baristo structure?
Yes. It was just recently raised to 3 hours.
To 3 hours, that was.
All
what I
of
was getting
downtown
at.
was just recently
Right.
raised to 3 hours free.
That's what I was getting at, so now people can stay there longer.
They can, but there's still signage for 2 hours for charging.
And that takes precedent?
Yes, at this point.
Okay.
We did discuss raising it to 3 because of the parking limit downtown, but that has yet to be, we haven't gone anywhere with that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm looking around, I'm not seeing a commissioner that seems to be pushing for some action in July related to setting some rates that we're gonna,
And we can report back with additional information we find.
okay. Okay. All right. Okay, we're at new business, discussion on our 2018-19 fiscal year budget for the recycling fund and the sustainability fund. And we've got 2 documents. The staff collected all the commissioners' suggestions, and then we've got a report of the ad hoc committee on priorities. So let's start with our list. How do we want to? Do you want me to lead that, or, I mean, the document I'm referring to is this one, which you have either on your screen, or you printed it, or you remember it. There it is. Do you all want to talk about it? Do you want me to lead a discussion? How do you want to proceed?
Well, why don't I open it up, and
Okay.
Mr. Chair, then you take over. And essentially, we've collected the suggestions and recommendations from everybody. And it may be a bit aggressive. And so from that perspective, I would suggest we think in terms of priorities and what we think we can accomplish in the 1 year's time frame, and what might make sense to pursue in future years. And that's my 2 cents.
Okay, so if we look at this, and if we look at the end, from documents that we had in the last meeting, doesn't it appear that in the recycling fund, can you scroll to the bottom, Dan? You've got the total in the first column, which is 125, the recycling fund, or possible expenditures of 376,000. The documents we had show that there was potentially slightly over $1 million that could be spent, okay? And then in the next column, the far right column, that's the sustainability fund, you're showing all the commissioners' suggestions added up to 2085. And one of the documents we had last meeting showed the available to budget for programming 275 was what was in a document we had last month. Those are right numbers, I think. Okay, I'm seeing a nod from Vice Chair Clark anyway. Okay, so Jay, you're saying that maybe to do all of these things might be on the aggressive side in terms of expenditure of funds? Did I understand that?
Yes, expenditure of funds, and more so with meeting so infrequently, once a month, I'm not sure we'd have, and, you know, the subcommittees do great, but still, it'd be a lot of work to try and tackle all these items.
Right, right. So even given that, and we'll get to your priorities in a bit, a budget's a roadmap of, you know, a plan of how you might chunk money in different categories. So theoretically, we could chunk it in places, and as passion, priority, availability of staff or commissioners move on it, certain things might get done and certain things might get deflected, I guess, or deferred to another year. So, I mean, I do get we're likely not to do all of the 25 things on this list. Maybe we should go back to the top and just, in case, not to talk about every one, but maybe look at the 6 categories, and if someone doesn't know what the item is, we could just have a quick explanation of it. Is that too putsy to do that? We know what bike routes and bike racks and route maps are. We don't have a dollar sign next to an update to the general plan. Do we need to do that, Grant? No? No, okay. So that's really an X. So
That really,
I was just gonna say that, some of them I didn't put numbers beside because they were very similar to the one either above or below
okay,
them.
all right. So the pedestrian walkability plan pilot project, do you want to just say a couple of sentences about what that is? Or
and Greg, you want to help
Commissioner
with that? I think that we could maybe say that falls under the guise of what we were talking about with Christine Hammond from the Measure J Commission. We had been discussing a bike, pedestrian, and even driver safety education program.
That's what that's about?
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, Christine has formed a work group as part of Code Enforcement and Public Works that has started to look at that.
Right.
Okay, all right.
So that may be a little pie in the sky.
Okay, all right. I wasn't sure what that was about, and I didn't know if everybody did. Under water conservation, we probably understand what rebates are generally about.
Yeah, I mean, this is just, Daniel circulated the materials from DWA meeting of 2 weeks ago, and they've got a decent amount, $300,000 in their rebate program for the upcoming fiscal year. They're doing outreach to the community in the next couple of weeks, and I thought that an allocation of $25,000 or some allocation to assist the HOAs, because most of the residents have already done that, and they will get the full $2 rebate from DWA and the state. But if we could find some money to just sort of tag on to DWA, it wouldn't require a massive amount of work, because if they approve it, we could work with them, they would approve it, and then we would do some form of matching. So that's a fairly simple, work with DWA, allocate X amount for HOAs to assist the HOAs, because that's where a lot of conversion is still available.
Okay. All right, there's a long list under recycling and waste reduction. A lot of them we've talked about. Are there any that are new that commissioners have questions about or don't know what the title means? Apparently not. I had to look up pyrolysis to find out what that word meant, but now I know. Decomposition at a high temperature. I guess everybody else knew that, huh? Am I the only one who didn't? That's a new word. Okay.
It
All right.
turns the plastic into oil.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. All right.
I do have a question. What are the recycling Tetra Paks?
Tetra Paks are those milk cartons that have aluminum foil on the inside, and it's tough to get the aluminum foil out, and so they're technically not recyclable. It's a problem everywhere, not just here in Palm Springs.
Say what they are again,
A
Commissioner
Tetra
Gordon?
Pak is a milk carton, like a milk carton container. So it's waxed paper on the outside, but
Oh.
inside there's aluminum foil, and they're bound together really tightly, and so it's not really feasible out, and you can probably speak to that, to get the aluminum foil off of the milk carton. So they tend to go in the landfill.
Okay. Did you added that to the list, or
I didn't.
Okay,
Jennifer
somebody did.
Futterman.
That was in our report.
Okay, oh,
In our
okay,
report,
all right,
right.
okay, all right.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question about that item that somehow it's got 30,000 allocated? What would I understand what they are now, but what does the cost get? I mean, why is that number there?
The person with the most detail on that is not here this evening, so it probably would be best to discuss that.
I can answer some of those. Some of these did not have dollar amounts placed to them, so I just kind of guesstimated something, pretty much. So this, like I said, this is very preliminary, so the dollar amounts can easily be changed.
I guess the question is it to develop a program to deal with those Tetra Paks? Is that the idea, or?
Right.
Okay.
And that would be similar to what we've done with batteries. It'd be a special recycling program. That's one way of doing it, but this is very preliminary.
Okay, all right.
And it's Commissioner McCann that has been working on that? Is that?
It was an idea that came from Commissioner Futterman, but if we did it, my thought would be, I don't think this is really something that's been addressed in a lot of places, so we would really be groundbreaking if we did it, honestly.
Okay. All right, just again, quickly, if we look at the green building and renewable energy, most of those items we've done before, or they're somewhat self-explanatory. I think. Anybody have questions about those? Okay. And likewise, I think the wellness and public health section is pretty straightforward. And probably in that section, the Sustainability Film Festival and Education Outreach Community Events Film Festivals, those are sort of a duplication, I guess.
Well, there's also the Wild and Scenic Film Festival that is, I think, is part of one of those. I think it's the 10,000 or less that was put on there. And Commissioner Futterman said she is still strongly interested in doing that, and that they're planning on doing something by December, I believe. So
Okay.
she's strongly for that and wanted me to push it for her.
Okay, so that should, okay, no, that's fine, but those are separate items, then is what I'm looking at, okay? Okay. All right, well, all right, I think we've examined this, so let's turn to the Budget Subcommittee and, given this document and your report.
So our subcommittee met, and while getting caffeinated, threw out some ideas, and this is sort of the result. There are really two things that we wanted to talk about, and one was being involved in the hiring of the new sustainability manager. My understanding is that City Council is moving forward with that. But our hope is that that person can come and do a job talk with us and kind of describe their experience, their passions, their interests, how they would work with each of our subcommittees, come and address the commission as a part of their application process. That feels like an important step.
I believe the application process is a confidential process, and so it may not be possible to have candidates, some of which whom may not want people to know they're applying for jobs, being in a public meeting to explain and present accordingly. However, in discussions with our Human Resources Department, they did say they haven't yet received much direction in terms of how the recruitment process will work. And in the past, commissioners have been invited to be included in the process, not necessarily through a public meeting, but maybe one or two participate on a panel in one section of an interview process. So that's a possibility. So there's some of those options that would be available. But I'm not sure a presentation or job talk here at a commission meeting would be possible.
Okay. But then, Jay, you are saying that, I mean, just so that we have that reported publicly, that was approved at the city council meeting on the first Wednesday.
The position, I
The position
believe-
was approved.
Correct.
June 6th.
Right.
Yep. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt, Commissioner Quarles.
Would that be the only way to sort of have involvement in the process?
I'll ask for other possibilities.
I know that there are other ways for commissions to have meetings that contain privileged information that aren't necessarily public.
Correct. Closed meetings are possible, so that may be one route.
And our second, the second priority that came up for us as a high priority was dealing with composting. And I think a number of us on the commission have talked about it tonight. It kind of suggests that it's becoming increasingly a passion. And there's some mandates that are going to support the need to deal with composting in a more aggressive way. And from our perspective, composting is a big process to undertake for a small city that's almost starting from zero, and that there are sort of three ways that we can tackle this, or three prongs to the approach. One would be, at the end of the day, I think what everyone wants here is industrial scale composting of some sort, the ability to, in this valley or in this region or close enough so that it's not cost prohibitive, be able to handle all of the organic waste that we produce here. But there are a couple of smaller steps that need to happen before that. And so in the report, we threw out two ideas for that. And the first and easiest might be a simple backyard composting program that could be, up and running within 6 months to a year that would help deal with household waste. And then as a second level, there would potentially be a pilot program, maybe involving a small community, a small HOA, or some other subset of the community that was involved in some way. So the first step would be supporting backyard composting. The second step would be a pilot with the idea that you could scale the pilot. And then a third would be down the line developing industrial scale composting. And those were our two priorities. And then we had a couple of other items that came up that we didn't have as much thought about at this point, but wanted to leave in our report so that, if there was discussion, they could be worked on too. And those were green economy and ecotourism, the Tetra Paks, and outreach. But our top two priorities were the sustainability manager and dealing with composting in a way that could be successful.
Sure. Commissioner, Vice Chair Clark.
And I'd just like to add to the composting part of it. One of the elements, the industrial scale composting, is the project that the Waste Reduction Subcommittee has been looking at, and there'll be a brief report on that tonight, and I expect we'll talk about it talk about it more in the July meeting.
Okay. All right. We didn't expect, I don't think we needed to take action on this tonight. Did we?
Well, in our report, we did have an action item about, in some way, being able to have a discussion with the candidates before they were hired.
Okay.
And I think it might be appropriate to, I think we could do it in a vague enough way so that the internal process could still meet our goals
Okay,
to send a recommendation to council about that.
okay, all right. Commissioner Goins, that's perfect. I appreciate you calling that action item out. My question was really about the detail of us adopting a program, a line item program budget tonight. And I didn't think we needed to get there tonight, that maybe this would just sort of be the first review. Is that okay, a first review of the dollars? Yes, Vice Chair Clark.
I have one comment. I think that the fact that now there will be the hiring of a full-time sustainability manager makes a difference in some of the line items here. We don't know when that person would be hired, but especially a lot of the ones in the top half of the page under recycling and waste reduction, I think some of those things could be done as part of the job of that person. So the costs that are shown here probably aren't realistic. So we may want to take a look at the priorities of some of these projects in light of the fact that we would have a manager that could do that as part of his or her job.
Okay. So, I'm open to suggestions on process. My sense is we can take any action that we want to take tonight, hear a motion, and address it. But in terms of allocation of dollars to line items, we might take a second look at that at the July meeting. Does that make sense? Okay. And if there are budget items in a subcommittee report tonight that we need to deal with, we can address that. So, do we want to entertain a motion that relates to Sustainability Commission involvement in the hiring process of a new manager? Is that, Commissioner Goins, is that?
Well, I was just thinking we had a committee with 3 people, so wouldn't that be a first and if my Robert's rules is correct, if you have we already have 3 commissioners who are already
Right.
on board, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, exactly. So you're saying, in effect, we have a motion and a second. I simply, if we look at the action item as you have written it, that maybe is not going to happen. So I just didn't know if you wanted to edit it in a particular way to say something more generic that would fit with what staff. If we're not going to get somebody here to a commission meeting, do you want to say it differently?
I think Jay or Daniel would do a better job than I would.
And I think the way Jay explained it is that there may be ways of doing it, and you can explore that with city
Right.
staff.
I'd like to discuss that with the city manager and see if he has thoughts on moving the process forward. And who knows, maybe it could be any of those alternatives we discussed, perhaps even what is considered a closed session meeting, or there may be a way to do that. So he may have some ideas that just I'm not aware of.
Well, so I'll just float this. Maybe what would help move the process along is the Sustainability Commission heartily endorses city council action to hire a full-time sustainability manager and requests all possible forms of involvement in the interview process to secure the best candidate. What about something like that? And that would then, a motion like that might, which we communicate our motions to the city manager, might, again, rise that to a little higher look. I'm just floating an idea.
Works for me.
I don't want to circumvent your subcommittee work. Chairs don't typically make motions. I just sort of did that off the top of my head.
This makes sense because there were issues that we weren't aware of when we made this recommendation or motion. So, in my opinion, it's certainly fine to change the motion, and what we've heard is acceptable.
Okay, and what have we heard? The words I said, or what Jay said, or what?
Both, but I think Jay described it that he would talk to the city manager and determine if there are ways that we could do that. And,
Okay.
And that's what you said is that we would somehow do this within the possibilities that the city has for us.
Yeah. Jay's comments weren't at all in the form of a motion, so I didn't know if you want a motion. If,
Yeah.
yes,
question.
please.
Maybe you guys can help here. If we adopted the report as written, and you have, and the city attorney or manager or HR director determine that that specifically is not possible, would the motion still convey the message that we want some involvement and just, it would be handled that way, or do we have to actually craft a whole new motion tonight?
No, I believe you're correct, Commissioner, that it is a request to have the top 3 candidates do a job talk, and could be open to some kind of if the request for one reason or another cannot be fulfilled, there may be an acceptable alternative without having to recraft the motion.
Okay.
Given that, I move to adopt the report as written.
Okay. Is there a second? Second from Commissioner Spry. Is there additional discussion on the ad hoc budget committee's submitted report? All in favor say yes.
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 Opposed say no. Abstain. Motion passes. All right. Thank you. And we will then also include more numbers talk at the July meeting. All right. Item 2, discussion on feasibility study regarding organic waste disposal. Is there, and I know Commissioner McCann's not here. Do you want to defer that to your full report or deal with it separately?
We can do it either way. Why don't we defer it?
Okay, all right. You'll include that in your waste reduction report. All right. Item 3, Safe Routes to Schools program. Commissioners Wilson and Gauthier, any information that you want to share with us tonight?
We actually do not have an update at this point, which is part of why we're pushing for the education program.
Ah, okay.
So we're maybe shifting gears a little bit.
Right. Right, so no report. Okay, item 4, I think we can deal with pretty quickly. In looking ahead at the calendar and given some other city entities' action, if we look at September, typically the commission has not met in August. Our regular meeting in September falls on the date that Yom Kippur begins at sundown. So that's pretty close to our meeting time and could be a conflict. So I was wondering if we might direct staff to find a different September meeting, and if there's a sense from the commission, do we stay on a Tuesday, either the Tuesday before or the Tuesday after, or else we move to the Monday before? Would those be, certainly not Wednesday. Wednesday wouldn't work at all because that'd be a council night.
We'd probably have to move to a Monday because the Tuesday before and the Tuesday after at this time are already occupied.
Okay, all right. So since that's pretty far out, would that be the easiest thing to do is just to ask staff to sort out a date?
For September?
For September that works. So you're saying Monday the 17th is your most likely scenario, or would it be another Monday?
Probably be the 24th, because the 17th that we have, there is a meeting at 4:30, so.
Okay.
It would have to be the 24th.
Okay, all right. Why don't you report back to us by email if there's if you have any further exploration about that. And I was personally wondering if there would be any interest or availability in moving the July meeting from the 17th to the 24th, given that it is summer. Even tonight, we've got 3 commissioners who are absent just on general schedules. Would meeting on the 24th be problematic?
Yes.
Okay, all right,
There's a 3 o'clock meeting on the 24th. We could do it on Monday, the 23rd.
okay. But maybe it's just best to keep it on the 17th at our regular meeting.
Either way. Since we're on that July meeting, the large conference room and the council chambers are again being closed for the month of July. So the meetings will be held at the Primrose C room at the convention center.
Okay.
And you do want to keep it on the 17th?
I will likely not be here, and that's just fine. Other commissioners can chair the meeting, and we'll be just fine.
Well, it
So-
will be,
You can volunteer for
we
that?
will be having elections
Yeah,
that
we'll be having,
night.
yeah,
which
well,
won't
and that
ma-
doesn't
yeah,
matter.
Doesn't affect you in either way.
It doesn't
so.
affect me in any way whatsoever, so, yeah. So I mean, I think, you know, we're sort of in a cycle of having meetings at a regular time, so,
Yeah, the problem with changing meetings around is, you know, as you can see, the calendar's full almost every
Right.
day, so.
yeah, let's keep July where July is, and I think, also Commissioner Baker had planned to be here on that date, and I think he confirmed that, so let's do that. All right, great. Okay, we are at the committee and commissioner reports, the Standing Committee on Solar and Green Building.
Okay, a bunch of good news items. First, at its meeting on June 6th, City Council unanimously approved the recommendation that we had made that the city choose the 100% carbon-free option for its own energy needs for DCE, which is going to be rolled out in August. The DCE website is now live. They've begun sending notices. And Daniel, thank you for posting the link on our page off to DCE. At yesterday's DCE board meeting, they approved basically following the SCE current system for those of us with solar PV panels. So it will be the same tariff structure and rebate that SCE offers. So it's a roughly 3%. If you have excess production, i.e. you or your system produces more than you have actually consumed during the 12-month period, then you get roughly 3 cents per kilowatt hour. So they may go to a higher incentive later once their financials are set and there's a little bit more clarity from the CPUC, but that's the system. It's going to be just basically what SCE is offering, and I've taken the tariff structure for DCE and have begun working on updating the cost-benefit ratio that we had seen 2 years ago when I was working on solar, and that is the objective, as we've previously discussed with Councilmember Coors, to come up and have some discussion at City Council, but I'm trying to get the numbers sort of refreshed, so I've sent that to Katie and Benjamin at CVAG, and they're going to take a look at it. But given the fact that SCE's rates have gone up since the last 2 years, I do show at least my back-of-the-envelope calculations. They're fairly complicated spreadsheet of higher savings if you go for solar. So I'm working on updating that, and if possible, like to see to get this to council for initial discussion, probably at their June 20th, whatever not June, that's tomorrow, the second July meeting, which is, I guess, the 18th, I believe. So that would be the objective, and Daniel, I'll keep you posted on that, because I've begun to start working on some materials. Also, good news is we got our SolSmart Gold designation, so we were informed of that, I guess, about 10 days ago, and Daniel, Jay, and I will be talking tomorrow morning with our contact for the National League of Cities, and we'll get a nice plaque, and we could perhaps get a city council presentation if it comes in time on that. There's an energy code compliance training session in San Francisco, and I will be there next week for the opera, so I'll be going back to that, and I'll report back and get some materials for staff to circulate as appropriate. And finally, we are working on the ZNE Energy Code training session for the fall, and I'll let Commissioner Goins, if you want to add anything about that.
So at our last meeting, we discussed what the content and the audience for that meeting would be. And it's still a little bit in flux, but sort of the idea of really honing it down to the folks who'd be implementers on the ground seemed to make the most sense. So if possible, desk staff in building code departments in the region, tradespeople who actually work in the trades, contractors, and students who will, by the time they graduate, be working under this code. And the thought is, and again, this is, you know, this is where we're moving, and so this may shift, but the thought is that, you know, these are building industry professionals who are on the ground in the field, and their primary concern is going to be, how do I build this thing? You know, what are the building assemblies that I'm going to be joining together to create this building that's going to be technically zero net energy? So that's that. From my the thinking is that should be the focus. So how do you get those building assemblies permitted? How do you actually build them, and how do you measure performance after they're built? So that's kind of a technical program, and it may be something that we could develop, find people who will, you know, volunteer, put together a program, but it may also be a situation where we have to have material developed. From my understanding, I know of at least 2 vendors who could do something like that for us, and it would be probably under $10K to do it as a start. But I think the value in doing something like that would be, it would not, you know, not simply that it would serve our, you know, the values and goals of this commission, but it would serve our region, and it would be a program that we could grow over time, you know, as things get updated. We could just continually update this program. So it'd be an outlay at first, but something that we could use more efficiently later on. So I'm working with a couple of vendors and some others to see if we can't pull this together. I think we want to be careful about how we market it and make sure we know that we don't, that there aren't any liability concerns. But from the perspective of the material, you know, if we're going to reach out to on the field, on the ground professionals, being very practical about building assemblies seems like the way to go.
And this is targeted for October.
October.
Are we the only funder of the event, or I mean, you're looking at valley-wide building professionals, right? I mean, I just wondered.
CVAG they'll cover some of the costs. So what we had done last year is that we found a friendly solar panel producer to help out. And we can reach out to that person to see, I mean, his company worked on the billboards, and that's what they covered. But I do think that as we get a little bit further, we should reach out and see if there's any way to come up with some funding. Obviously, if we're going to come up with some really prescriptive materials, that we shouldn't, you know, that we should really look to see if any other CVAG or somebody else can help, because that's above and beyond the call of duty for the city of Palm Springs, if you ask me. Clearly, if there's bringing somebody in from Sacramento, you know, we may cover some of that. We are closely working with DVBA, so once again, that would be a good source of asking for some help.
Okay, I just wondered. I mean, Palm Springs is often the leader, so
Yeah.
why not? But yeah. Commissioners, questions of Commissioner Goins and Friedman on their report? We really are going to start getting some desert community energy information soon. August 1 is 6 weeks away.
You probably got both buttons here. You probably have you have solar panels?
I do.
Okay, and that's the reason why you haven't gotten the letter, because they were waiting until the decision yesterday. If you don't have solar panels, you would have gotten the letter sometime last week.
Oh, okay. So raise your hand if you got a letter and opened it. Yay, good for you. Okay, perfect. Or some sort of communication.
Yeah,
Okay,
the
great.
solar letter, now that yesterday's decision was made, the solar letter should follow shortly.
Okay, all right. Good answer.
We've already had some calls on it as well here, wondering what it was, if it were spam mail or not. Even if it came in the mailbox, had a call asking if this was really from the city or something the city's sponsoring, and I assured them that yes, it was real. So they were.
Okay.
I think it's fun.
Yeah, I can understand. In the age of fake news. All right. Anything else from you? Okay, thank you very much. Standing Committee on Waste Reduction, Commissioners Spry and Vice Chair Clark.
I'll give the report. I'll just touch upon some things briefly with regarding the polystyrene takeout container potential ban and plastic straw ban. We've had many discussions on that. A lot of work has been done. The last thing that we were working on is we created a questionnaire that we wanted to send out to restaurant owners in Palm Springs, to a simple questionnaire to get an idea of what they're using now for takeout containers and what the impact would be on them if there was a ban on polystyrene containers and a ban or limited use of straws. The wall that we bumped up against is that we can't get email addresses for the restaurants. There are, and our intention was to do this via email, expecting that, well, it wouldn't cost anything, and we would be more likely to get responses. So we'll have to regroup and discuss what we want to do with regard to that. We've talked a lot about the bottle and can recycling containers in public parks, and Rob gave a presentation showing the final design that we had come up with. And Dan reported to us that the order has been placed and that the bins will ship on June 26th.
They'll be here tomorrow.
Terrific.
Wow.
And then it'll take about 2 weeks or so to get them placed in the parks.
Right, I would probably like to get you and Rob and Jessica to maybe talk with Ken Kershaw, our Parks Maintenance, and see how you would like them placed. I know Rob had, Commissioner McCann stated he wanted them next to a trash container.
Yes, and that's probably the biggest requirement that we have, is that we pair them up, but then we'll have to determine what parks they go in. And we have had some discussion with the Parks and Recreation Commission, and I think they were going to make some input to that as well. So, well, that's good news. And then the third item is organic waste, and that was the second item under new business as well. The subcommittee has spent quite a bit of time talking about ways of dealing with organic waste. From one extreme is having an anaerobic digestion facility like in Paris. I don't think that's feasible here in Palm Springs based upon feedback. But Rob has gotten some information from a company called Energia Corporation, and they build and deploy equipment that can be used at existing wastewater treatment plants. And basically it's a machine that under high pressure extracts the organic waste from the general solid waste that is picked up in a city, and that organic waste then can be put into the wastewater treatment facility, which already treats organic wastes. And so basically everything that we put in our brown trash containers would go into this machine, would be compressed, the organics would be separated that way as liquids, and then the solids would then be taken to the landfill as they currently are. There's some work that is already being done to look at the feasibility. The Energia Corporation has a questionnaire, which I think Rob has received. Not yet?
Yeah, no, it's already been sent to the wastewater treatment plant, and they have returned it.
Okay, so that's further than I had heard from Rob, but basically the questionnaire was to look at how this might work with our current wastewater treatment plant at Mesquite and Gene Autry.
Correct, and they're now at the point to where they want to have a face-to-face meeting, I think, with the wastewater treatment plant and the subcommittee and engineering.
So that's great. And then what affects this commission also is that we talked about having a feasibility study, and that would be on the agenda for July to approve a feasibility study, and we would know the cost of doing it by then. So we probably will have to wait until Rob gets back to have that meeting.
Right, they're looking at early July.
Okay, that would work fine then.
And just, this would include residential Or would you start with restaurants that generate such a large amount of
It would
of
include, it
food
would
waste?
include residential as well. Anything that is put into a brown trash container would go through this process.
Okay.
Can I tie in?
This is your report, the two of you, so.
Thank you. Okay, well, I just want to tie in when we were talking about the need and the desire for composting. And, you know, and so it would be a further discussion because obviously a project like this is many years down the line. It's a lot of money, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of process. It's amazing. It would be great to bring something like that to the Coachella Valley. So we would have to decide now, in the meantime, for however many years it takes to do this, do we want to implement a composting program in the meantime? Is that helpful? You know, that's a long conversation, and we've started that conversation with Chris Cunningham, talking about, okay, where would we, you know, say we collect it, who pays for that? Say we could pay for that, then, you know, where do you take it? It goes, you know what I mean, to process it at this point, we don't have any, you know, do you remember where he said they could take it? If we did a composting, where Chris said, anyway, it's far away, it's really expensive, you need to weigh out, you know, the cost benefit for, you know, how much resources is it take to collect and then move all this organic waste to where they could currently process it, right? And then, you know, say we could have this wastewater treatment thing right away, it would take away the need to have organic green composting bins. Does that make sense? But then we still need to talk about in the meantime, and I think that was brought up. So does that make sense? I'm just trying to talk about the process and where do we go next steps and deciding, you know, is it worth it to try to, if we can get this going, is it worth it to try and implement the green waste beforehand? If so, what would that look like? You know.
And so, just to follow up, the timing, having that meeting in July would be really good because then we'd be ready to have a much more detailed discussion on the feasibility study at the July meeting.
Right, I haven't heard any more on a specific date. That's where it was last left, was that they're, like I said, ready to do a face-to-face meeting in early July.
I'll let Rob know that. He's probably reading his emails some of the time.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Commissioners, questions about this 2.5-page report? They're a busy group. All right. Thank you, and thanks to Robin and Simcha. Item 3, ad hoc subcommittee on walkable and pedestrian planning. Any report tonight?
Nothing beyond what we mentioned under F3,
Okay. All right.
unless Greg, you have something to add?
In wellness, Commissioner Baker is in Sacramento tonight. And I will note that he and I and some other folks had a little email related to that. You might have seen this notice, which I do want all of you to know about anyway. Healthcare District Links People and Services was in the Desert Sun on May 22nd. It speaks of the CVHIP. It's a .com, I think. Is it .com? Yes, it is. CVHIP.com. It's Coachella Valley Health Information Portal, or maybe they changed the last word. Anyway, what I wanted you to know is that the Sustainability Commission, through the mayor's race, donated a significant amount of funding that got this program initially started. And so while we weren't mentioned in the article, I want you all to take some credit. And I was down for a pilot view when it was first developed, and so we did have some beginnings of that new resource that's available in the Coachella Valley. All right, water, Commissioner Friedman.
Okay, few things. First, following up on the previous rebate discussion, in addition to the rebates for HOAs and residences, there's actually a $3 rebate for government projects that the city would be eligible for, and the DWA board is strongly encouraging the city to actually go and do a project and apply for its rebate, and there is enough funding in the budget they approved this morning. So Jay and Daniel, maybe that's a discussion that we can have with Stacy. Pilot projects are just some things that would be highly visible, would be the fountain, the grass around the fountain, and on the north side of East Palm Canyon by the saguaro across from Smoke Tree, it looks pretty awful there. Maybe they're doing something, but it does look pretty sad. So those are two potential areas where the city could do a project and get up to $3 rebate. I believe it's limited to $40,000, but it's worth following up and coming up with something and working with Stacy and Ashley Metzger to do that. The money is available from DWA, and they'd like to see us do that. So talking about the DWA budget, it was approved this morning, and along with rate increases that will go into effect starting on July 1. It's roughly a 10% increase in the variable rate and a 24% increase in the fixed rate. They have a lot of leaky pipes. The system is reaching its life cycle end for pipes that came in literally in the 40s as Palm Springs was growing right after the war, and so they've allocated $4 million for pipeline replacement in the budget, which is in itself a water conservation because the water just goes out of the pipes. And more visibly, it requires EWA crews out, on the city streets. There's a lot of leaky pipes that they've got, so they're trying to get ahead of that. And finally, we got the May water conservation numbers. The number was good for May, a roughly 21% reduction from the 2013 baseline. Cumulative savings over the last 12 months is 13.4%, which is in line with their 10 to 13% target. And then the cumulative savings since 2016, when they began the 10 to 13, is roughly 17%. So there has been at least a bit of a catch up on some of the numbers, and that hopefully, particularly with the additional turf replacements, will continue to show.
Questions, commissioners? All right. Commissioner Futterman is absent, but she would want you to know that the World Environment Day did happen on Sunday, June 3rd at the Pavilion. How many, I dropped in, Commissioner Wilson was there. Yeah, we had, that's what I thought. We had a really good, I wasn't there the whole time, but we had a good representation of commissioners that were there. So thank you all for that, and I know Commissioner Futterman appreciates that.
She said she will make a full report at the next meeting.
Great. All right. Are there commissioner comments? Yes, Vice Chair.
Just to follow up on milkweed and butterflies and the mayor's pledge. I know Dan had reported that he filed the paperwork for the mayor's pledge after it was approved by the city council in April. We have a committee, actually. We're forming a board, a larger organization to deal with education and dissemination of plants and so forth. And one of the things that we discussed recently is what do we do now that we have the mayor's pledge? Because actually the idea was that we might, get some traction out of it. If people in the city know that the mayor has signed this pledge, then they may be more likely to go along and plant milkweed and so forth. So I just wanted to mention that I contacted Councilmember Coors and asked him about his ideas for perhaps following up on the mayor's pledge, like perhaps having a press conference or a press release. And we've had a lot of milkweed planted around the city in parks and other city properties, so that might be those might be good places to have a photo opportunity along with a press release. Maybe we could have a proclamation. So hopefully I'll hear back from Jeff, and then we can go on further with that.
And in regards to that too, several of the monarch, or the milkweeds have been planted here at City Hall.
That's great. We have a few left that we're looking at a couple more locations within the city to plant them. And Kenny Kershaw, who works for Stacy, has been really good about doing that work.
other commissioner comments? All right. Then we will entertain a motion for adjournment until our July meeting. Is there a motion that we adjourn? So moved. So moved by Commissioner Santora. Second from Commissioner Goins. All in favor say yes. Yes. And we are adjourned for the evening. Thank you very much.